Hello everybody, welcome into my latest live broadcast. I saw this is a little misaligned here. I was trying to fix it and that intro is so short I didn't have enough time to get everything activated here, so I apologize for that weird little awkward start. But that won't happen anymore. Am I looking a little red? Colors look a little off to me. I don't know if it's my monitor. None of the settings on the cameras have changed, so let me know. Hopefully you can see and hear me okay, just the same. Today, what is today? It is November the 7th. It is Monday, 2022. And as you can tell from the topic of today's video, we're going to talk about M.2 NVMe solid-state drives and how marketing plays a big role, more so than any other, when the folks, the typical folks like you guys who watch videos like mine, are getting swept up in, a lot of you are getting swept up in marketing hype, and it's all designed to extract more dollars from your pocket. And we'll talk a little bit about that today, as well as address any questions, technical questions that you guys have. I'll do my best to provide answers, as well as encourage our audience to participate with providing you answers as well. So I just realized I didn't bring my phone out here. I'm gonna just, man, I am just pushing it today. Bear with me here for just a second. Let me, first of all, give a shout out of huge thanks to Jack Wilson and Peter Laycock, Buster, as well as all of our regular contributors and regular participants in our chat room, who, and all of you watching, I hope if you're not a part of this amazing community that you will consider being a part of it. It's the friendliest, most supportive community on the internet that I've ever encountered. So we do our best to sort of weed out the jerks. And that's really the only prerequisite, is don't be a jerk. Nothing else matters. So with that, I want to tell you a little bit about what's happening in the industry, at least what I'm noticing. And that is, I'm seeing people getting caught up more and more with benchmarks, more than any other time that I can recall. Certainly when I first started professionally in computers, I was building computers for AutoCAD workstations primarily. That was 1991, and benchmarks weren't really anything anybody, when I say anybody, the end customer, the end user, typically didn't make any sense of it. It wasn't a whole lot to compare. And these days, it seems that a lot of the folks who participate in watching review videos or watching tech videos are getting hung up on reviews, and who can, not on reviews, on benchmarks, and who can blame them when that is sort of the universal judgment that has been exercised, displayed, and accepted by both the content creators and the end users. But what you won't know, because you're not in the business, and you will know this if you are in the business, is that most end users will see no difference between a SATA SSD, a PCIe Gen 3 by 2 or by 4, or a PCI Gen 4 or a PCI Gen 5 in performance. What I encourage you to do, if you're curious, is to run the test yourself. And that is, if take your workstation, take your computer, put in a budget NVMe drive. Say we put in an Intel 660p NVMe drive. Let's just say, for example, it's going to move about 2,000 megabytes per second on a sequential read. And then I want you to time how long it takes for your computer to boot into Windows. And I want you to open up whatever applications you use and just use a good old-fashioned stopwatch and just see how long it's taking. Then go ahead and clone that drive over to the fastest, highest performance drive you can buy. Let's say a Seagate FireCuda 530 Generation 4, moving data at 7,000. So 7,000 megabytes per second, which is 3.5 times faster than an Intel drive. Then boot up your computer, launch your applications. Once again, just use a good old-fashioned stopwatch. Now, the difference in price that we're talking about, if the capacities are the same, is upwards of 7 times the price, depending on where you're shopping. And, you know, if we're talking about MSRP, which, let's face it, at this point now, the Intel NVMe drives are all well below MSRP. And then the ones that are the super high performance drives, they are marked up because the manufacturers, are seeing some decent profit by convincing you that that's worth paying more for because it's moving data faster. But that doesn't mean you're moving data faster. What you have to understand is, for the drive to exhibit that performance, is you would have to have yet another drive that could keep up with it in the case of file transfer. If you're transferring anything over the network, anything over USB, even that slow budget Intel drive is going to perform equally in those scenarios. Where a user might see the difference is in an unusual way that they use the machine, something that's not common. So when it comes to loading very, very large files, they would see a difference in a high performance drive that's very costly, of the same capacity as a budget drive, again, of the same capacity, but in only those applications. So for example, if I bring up a video that I want to render, so let's say I bring up Cyberlink Power Director, and I have this 1.5 hour long video that I've edited. It's got transitions, it's got overlays, and I go to render that out at 1080 or 4K, whatever the resolution is, and we were to do that live, you'd see how much time that's going to take as it renders out the file and starts saving it to my local C drive. If my local C drive, in this example, was the Seagate Fire CUDA or the Intel budget drive, what difference do you think it's going to make on my render time? Now, it may make a slight difference. However, in my experience, it's not worth the added expense unless I'm rendering videos all day, every day, where it starts to add up. And the same holds true with these high performance drives, in that in those occasions where you are loading something that's sizable from that C drive, you will see that benefit in that moment. But very few users actually have so much reading or writing of data to or from that C drive that it will make any significant impact in performance of the machine getting things done notably quicker. Now, for those of you in the chat, let me ask you this. Would you rather have, let me rephrase the question. Do you believe that your system will run faster if you upgrade your NVMe drive? And if so, I'd like to know how you use your computer and whether or not that use is considered normal or typical. Typical is probably a much better word than normal. I'm sure everything you're doing is normal. However, I don't know that many people of all computer runners would be using it in that way. So I'm just kind of curious, in what way do you use your computer that you believe having a 7,000 megabyte per second read, sequential read NVMe storage drive would be ideal for you and would be worth paying 3.5 times more than an Intel 660p, assuming the same capacities, assuming the Seagate's the Gen 4, the Intel's the Gen 3. That Gen 3 Intel is under $100, let's just say, and the Seagate is around $700, $600 to $700, assuming we're playing with comparing the same capacities. Explain to me what you are going to do with this drive that justifies spending that money, because I feel like one of us is missing something, and I'm just really curious who these drives are really for. I understand, they market a lot of external USB, super fast USB drives for PlayStation and Xbox, right? But you're still limited by the bandwidth of the USB. And likewise, when you're dealing with internal storage of your computer, where's the data going? Are you moving it somewhere? Are you uploading it? Are you moving it across a network? Are you moving it to an external drive? All of that stuff is your bottleneck and prevents that drive from running at its peak. So you'd have to be loading something sizable and all the time for that to really benefit you to the point of spending that kind of money. Now, I realize some of you have a lot of money. You just want it because you want it. There's nothing wrong with that. But for the rest of us, are you better off taking that additional money that high performance drive costs and putting it into something that may actually make a difference for you, much more so, such as a better video card, more RAM, or even an upgraded processor? And that's the question for today, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on it, so please go ahead and leave your comments there in the chat room, and I'm going to see what I'm missing here in the chat. I see a couple of Super Chat contributions have come in. So thank you to XRod666 with a $5 contribution. He says, what's up? I see Pratap Gunrung with a $10 contribution. Thank you, Pratap. That's the two contributions. I don't think there was any others. If I've missed yours, please do let me know. I like to give a shout out and say thank you to those who are kind enough to help support the channel. David Starbuck says, not for what I do. Internet, light gaming, even a SATA SSD wouldn't bottleneck my system. Let's see, Long Dog says, having a Samsung 980 Pro 2 terabyte drive, I can tell you this, Windows doesn't seem to be loading all that much quicker. Given the specs for the drive, it's kind of surprising. Yeah, I think that's what most people will find, because if you watch the reviews, universally, they all run benchmarks, and they're all typically the same handful of benchmarks. And for some reason, we accept those benchmark results as if they are relevant to how we use our computer. So the benchmarks aren't necessarily lying, but the benchmarks are not replicating a typical amount of time of how data moves around in your computer under normal use scenarios. So when I see people asking questions and they say which NVMe drive is the best, or which motherboard is the best, which processor is the best for what? What are you going to do with it? At some point, what I'm seeing a lot of is I see people paying way too much money for a system that's way more powerful than anything they needed. And they're not benefiting from it whatsoever other than psychologically. Now, there's a benefit to, the psychological aspect of being happy with your computer. But when you're in business and you're earning a living with your computer and you're taking profit that you're working so hard to make to put it into a machine to help you make more profit, that you'd be better off, let's say, in the case of business, to buy 2 lower end machines to have twice as much output for likely the same cost and possibly even less than the cost of one high-end enthusiast level machine. So which one would be the better investment for a business? Of course, this depends on the business and how the machines are being used. But in general, the vast majority of my clients are either home users or small offices. They're law firms, they're dentist offices, they're lawyer offices. They won't receive any benefit from this overkill of RGB lighting or liquid cooling or overclocking. They would just be spending more and more money getting swept up in the hype. Now, these companies that manufacture this stuff make very little profit on the budget items. Whatever they're selling, whatever is their budget line of products, they might be making, I don't know, 10, 15% margins. They're very, very thin margins. When we get into the stuff that's not necessary, like a Rolls Royce wouldn't be necessary for most of us, there's a lot more expense. It's not a little bit more, it's a lot more expense. And for what? Is it about impressing people? Is it about the psychological feeling of I'm driving a Rolls Royce? And if you can afford that, that's great. But again, I want to focus on the majority, the vast majority of computer owners and how their computer is used. So if you're one of those people that's like, yes, I absolutely need to have the fastest, I would, if you wouldn't mind, tell me why. Tell me how you're using it so I can better understand why that investment makes sense. Because so far in my career, I have installed these super high-end parts for customers. And then when I hear from the customers later about how they're using them, they're not using them in any other way that would take advantage of those higher performance. I don't know if they don't know any better, but they could be essentially, the vast majority of the end users could have gotten away with spending significantly less amount of money for less powerful system and not noticed, not known any different, utilizing the computer the same exact way they are today, only on a budget, more budget-driven system, and would receive no noticeable impact in performance or reliability. Now, again, there are always exceptions to the rule, but I'm talking about the average user, the average computer system, and I'm also talking about the average tech video here on YouTube that's always going after the flash. They're going after the big benchmark numbers, but rarely have I ever seen any of these folks who are making these videos justify why you'd want that. Yes, it's faster. Yes, it's more expensive. We get that. But now what do you do with it? Show me why that's worth buying, other than I have some money burning a hole in my pocket. I have nothing to do with it. I am flush with cash. So I think I'm just going to get the fastest I can get. You know, that's a valid reason. Don't get me wrong. But I don't find that logic from the vast majority of end users. Most end users are looking for the best price they can get, even when it means they're jeopardizing system repairability, the system upgradability. They're just worried about getting a solution for today, and they'll worry about whatever tomorrow. Other people I run into sometimes have a lot more money, and what they want to do is just buy a good system today so they don't have to worry about it for the next 8 to 10 years. It's hard to know what our needs are going to be 8 to 10 years from now. I get the logic, and if you can afford it, absolutely, statistically speaking, you're more likely not going to need to replace that computer for 8 to 10 years. However, even a budget system, if you're building it yourself, can be upgraded at any point at any time in individual little pieces. You don't have to do it all at once. So if you suddenly find you could utilize more RAM, or you're starting to run out of storage, you can put your money into that one part and upgrade your existing system. And then over time, it's not like these computers aren't welded closed. You can, if your needs require it, upgrade pieces to meet those needs at that time, rather than trying to second guess what your future needs are going to be and believe that you're going to just spend a large chunk of change now so you won't have to do that again anytime soon. There's no guarantee for that. So let me see in the chat room what you guys are saying here on this subject. Matt says he has a Samsung 970 EVO arriving later today. Fred Centerman said, I can afford the higher price drives, but it's not worth it to me. Matthew Burton said, I've noticed a difference in performance, and I use AutoCAD and Revit on a daily basis to design my houses. So when you say you notice a difference in performance in what precisely? And how much? 10%? 20%? 100%? Are you getting twice the performance? And how much of your day are you using the computer? And of that time you're using the computer, how much more work would you say you're able to get done as a result? That's my curiosity. And then how much extra are you paying for that result? In other words, are you putting in an extra $1,000 so you can get 10% more output? That might be worth it to you. I'm not saying it is or it isn't one way or the other. I'm just trying to understand. Just because, I don't know how long it takes you to design a house. I don't know if you're doing 6 houses a day or 1 house every 6 weeks. So I don't know where that benefit falls for you and how much of a benefit it actually is. In other words, if the system's basically booting the same amount of time, your software is loading in essentially milliseconds of difference, where is it that you're noticing it's faster? And are you noticing it's faster because of the RAM? Are you noticing it's faster because of the CPU? Or are you noticing that it's faster because of the GPU or the storage? Or have you even tried? Some people just throw money at the wall and say, give me the best motherboard, the best CPU, the best RAM, the most amount of RAM, and give me the fastest and best storage. And then they say, yes, I see a difference. When in fact, maybe only one of those things is the thing that's making the difference. That's what I'm curious about. And it's not to say nobody can have a reason why, but how many of you here use AutoCAD, and how many of you in the audience design houses? So when we talk about the averages, I want you to understand that you shouldn't feel bad that you don't have the fastest drive on the market according to the benchmarks. That's a terrible reason to be unhappy with your computer, because if at the end of the day your computer is still performing roughly the exact same with or without those expensive upgrades, you should feel good that you didn't spend the money, not the other way around. Oh, Matthew says, I have never, sorry, I think I misread his quote, his message on the chat room. I have never noticed a difference in performance. Yeah, I got to catch that word never. Well, then never mind my questions. Unless you do notice a difference in something, any of you, please tell me what it is and how much is it really saving you in time, or how much more production are you able to get done? Now, I realize some people are, a lot of people who are watching tech YouTube videos are all about gaming. They're about getting the highest resolutions, the highest frame rates. But that is sort of like being a Rolex watch collector. Again, it doesn't represent the vast majority of gamers. Most gamers don't generate the kind of revenue that would be required to pay for that level of componentry. And well, most gamers would desire, let's say, a 4090 graphics card. Again, it would be beneficial maybe in the latest AAA titles. I don't know how beneficial it would be if you're playing classic games. World of Warcraft has been around for what, 20 years, 15, 20 years? You could still play that with a computer that has a built-in GPU on the CPU, and it plays. So having that on a super high-end graphics card isn't really that beneficial. And then, of course, being good at playing the game, I think, is much more valuable than just buying higher-end hardware. It's sort of like you can pay money for more horsepower on your car, but that does not make you a better driver, and it doesn't mean you're more likely to win the race. A better driver will win the race with less horsepower and less money spent. Just saying. So that's where we get into the psychological aspect of it. So I just want you to think about it. And again, if you have a counterpoint, I'd love to hear it, because I've been beating my head against the wall trying to figure out what is going on. It's hard for me to recommend parts to some individuals who effectively have had their information poisoned, diluted with accurate factual content that doesn't play out to much of any benefit in the real world. So it's a difficult conversation to have with people. Now, I am a terrible businessman. If somebody wants to spend an outrageous amount of money for stuff they don't need, and I can sell it and profit from it, the capitalist thought process is try and sell them 2 or 3 of them. So for that reason, I am a terrible businessman. I admit it. I want to sell people what they need. I don't want to undersell them. I don't want to oversell them. And the only time I will oversell them is if they're telling me, you know, look, in the future I plan on doing this, that, or the other. And while I don't need this today, I'd rather go ahead and get it this way, you know, configured this way today so that nothing's holding me back when I'm ready. I get that. And again, if you can afford to do that, that's wonderful. But the average consumer that I speak to and the average business that I work with, that is absolutely not the mentality. The money is always the first concern. So when people want to ask me, what's the best video card or what's the best CPU, what's the best whatever, my question to them is, what's your budget? At the end of the day, your budget is going to define what you can afford. And the higher performing items, whether it's a faster RAM, larger, faster storage, faster CPU, amounts to spending more money. And if you don't have that kind of money to spend, I don't know why you're even having the discussion with me, because you basically have multiple different answers to your question, which is, well, there's factually what runs the best in benchmarks. But then there's how you're going to use it and whether or not it has any benefit to you. And then third, even if we agree that this high-end RTX 4090 graphics card would be ideal for you, very few people have the money to afford that who are asking for it. So the whole thing kind of comes back around to, what can I do for you? You know, I can't make the price any less, and I can't make it any more useful for you. So why not get the ideal thing that's right for you? And the benefit of building it yourself or having a system built for you is that you can customize it. You can make changes to it when your budget allows for it or as your needs change. I know people that suddenly, out of the blue, got into photography. And now they need tons and tons of storage space, but the performance of the storage doesn't really seem to make much difference. They might need a faster processor or more RAM to process images if they start getting into Photoshop. And maybe that wasn't something they were into until recently. So the machine they have now will certainly get the job done, but they might feel like, well, when it's doing this process, it's a little slow. I'd like to speed that up. Once we have information like that, then we can be more accurate with what the right part would be once we know how much money they have budgeted for that. So the first thing is, the very first thing is, how much money do you have? The second thing is, then what is the best performance for accomplishing this kind of a task for this much money? And so the answer is going to be different for everybody because of that. There's not one answer any YouTube content that can provide to you that would say this is right for you. They have no idea what's right for you. Budget plays a giant role in this, obviously. It's not as though all the parts sell for the same price. William Dawson said, in my case, I use a middle-of-the-line NVMe rated about 3,500, 3,000. So that's like a Samsung 970 EVO. I get them on sale. I use my computer for general purpose home use and light gaming sometimes. Abdul Azim Patel wants to know, on an AB350 AMD motherboard or X470 based AMD motherboard, are they upgradable to 5000 series CPU? I'm just curious for those that may have AMD AB350 or X470 boards. So the 5000 series CPUs, as long as it's a socket AM4, obviously the 7000 series are a different socket type. what you'd need to do is you would go to the motherboard manufacturer's page and you would look up that specific motherboard. So let's take, for example, let me bring up a browser here and let me share the screen with you. Give me just a second and I'll set this up. We'll go through it together. I'll show you. Because there's not any one universal answer. It depends, what board do you have? What's in it now? What is it you want to go to? How much money do you have to spend is always going to be a factor as well, right? If it can accept a 5,000 CPU, but you can't afford it, there's no point in going any further with that question. However, let's just say money's not an issue. We just want to pop a chip out and put a new chip in. It's very unusual for customers to do that. The whole idea of upgrading your CPU, I would guess fewer than 7% of all computer owners will upgrade their CPU rather than just replace the whole system. But here online, you know, those people who are technical enough to be able to do that are also the same people who will write about it or make videos about it. So you may be under the impression that that's a common thing when it really is very, very uncommon. How many here in the chat room have upgraded your CPU but kept the motherboard? Ever in your entire life? I'd be kind of curious, what did you have and what did you upgrade to? People do it, but they don't do it very often. It's not a very common thing. But hey, let me go back, let me share my screen here and let's go back to looking up the answer to that question, to give you an example of how you would go about finding this particular answer, depending on what board you have, what CPU you have, and what CPU you want to go to. So let me look for my screen share, or window capture. Here's my window capture. Let's turn that on. And we're going to go to Google. I always go to Google because my search results on Google are always pretty much what I'm looking for right at the top of the search results. So that's why I use Google. And we want to look for AB350, let's say a gigabyte, AB350 motherboard. All right, so here's one. I have one of these boards here in Studio B, as a matter of fact. And so the first link takes us to gigabyte.com, and right here under support, we're going to click that. And we're going to look under what's called CPU support. Now, every manufacturer of motherboard, ASRock, at least the big ones, right? ASRock, ASUS, MSI, and Gigabyte, are going to have a support section that looks pretty close to everybody else's. And when we click on CPU support, we can see that the Ryzen 9 5850X is compatible with this motherboard, provided that you have a power supply that can provide the additional power, assuming it needs additional power from what you have now. And we need a BIOS version that is going to be at this level or higher. When you're going to do this, you absolutely want to make sure you flash the BIOS on the board with your old processor still in it before you put the new processor in, or you're going to be in a world of hurt trying to get that motherboard to start up with a CPU it doesn't recognize. But as you can see, we can scroll down this list and we can see all the processors that this motherboard is compatible with. This information will not be in your motherboard manual because you might have purchased this motherboard 4 years ago and your motherboard manual was printed 4 years ago. This chip wasn't available 4 years ago, so there's no way they could have, had a crystal ball to tell you what future chips this motherboard was compatible with. That's why you would go to the site, to the specific motherboard manufacturer, to the specific motherboard model, and look at the CPU support section, which will be updated. Your owner's manual, not so much. You have to go this route. And then you can see what's compatible and then what prerequisite you would need, which is, in this case, make sure you have enough power delivery and make sure you have that latest BIOS installed. So I hope that answers your question, and that's how you would be able to answer that for anybody who asks you. Let me go back to camera one. Oops, there we go. And let me go back to the chat and see what I'm missing here. Feral Sparky says, I got an old i7-2600 at the office for my daily PC. It has 16 gigs of RAM and a rather cheap SATA solid-state drive. That PC is still amazingly fast for what I need it for. That's my point. The Intel NUC, the original Intel NUC that I built in April of 2013, you can find it here on the channel, April of 2013, is still in use every single day today. It is used for remoting in to work. And that computer has been super reliable. Now, it's the way the end user's using it is different, right? Because they weren't remoting in from work before. And when they remote in, they've got a VPN connection, they've got a remote connection, and they've got a VoIP phone system, and along with a webcam and a headset. So they're essentially like they're in the office, but now they're at home. That machine is really getting bogged down resource-wise. It's just an i3, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, but it's essentially like somebody's had this boat that they always tow behind their car, and now they got a bigger, heavier boat, but they didn't replace the car. The car's still towing it, but it's just not as fast, but it gets the job done. And the phone conversations, still happen in real time regardless. The remote connection, when they click on things, is still responsive because, again, our bottleneck is going to be the internet connection, not the computer. Now, getting everything fired up when the computer's first turned on probably would see a small benefit upgrading it to, let's say, a 12th gen NUC. Sure, it's going to seem faster. When you click, it's going to respond quicker, but it's not going to be like they're waiting very long now. So it's not like they have to get up and go make a cup of coffee and come back before whatever they've clicked on has resulted in a response. It's happening relatively quickly. And to make that a little bit snappier might be important to some people. However, it doesn't change your internet connection speed. It doesn't change your speed at which you are capable of working. And it doesn't mean your phone's going to ring any faster or any more often. The VoIP is still the same VoIP. The phone's still going to ring with the same amount of delay or lag, if any exists at all. That won't go away. Let's see. Bobby Warren says, I have problems with access my IP address on my computer, like log into my IP. I have a Spectrum router. Well, what is it you're trying to do? Very, very few people would ever need to know their IP address. I think maybe you're hung up on something and you're going down the completely wrong path to get to wherever it is you're going. Let us know what you're trying to do, and we'll let you know how to go about doing it. Instead of asking, how come when I do this it doesn't work? Why are you doing that? What is it you are trying to accomplish? And we can help you. Mike Quinton contributes $30 via Super Chat. Hey, right on. Thank you, Mike. He says, if the 7K speed solid-state drive, like a 980 Pro or FireCuda 530, are supposedly for video rendering, are they the most widely sold, or are the mid-range 3K speed SSD more popular? I don't know what the sales numbers are, but generally speaking, the expensive stuff doesn't sell the same kind of numbers as the cheaper stuff. I don't know anything about this assumption that you've sort of conveyed something that I don't think is true when you say that they're the most widely, they're used for, supposedly for video rendering is where they benefit. I don't know where you heard that. I have never seen a solid state drive make a difference in any video editor ever, whether it was Pinnacle Studio or Adobe Premiere or Cyberlink Power Director. What I have seen make a difference is the amount of RAM that's in use and the video card that's in use. I know with Cyberlink Power Director, those CUDA cores are really important. So by having an AMD Radeon card, let's say, that doesn't have any CUDA cores, you're going to see a very big difference in your rendering time, more than likely. But it depends on the video editing software. But again, I'm not aware of any video editing software that's heavy, so heavy on the storage drive that it makes any perceptible difference in video editing. One of the most intense programs that I have ever used as far as computer resources go is DaVinci Resolve. And there's a free version of that you can download. It's a very, very powerful video editor. And if you doubt what I'm saying, then I encourage you, please download DaVinci Resolve on your machine. Grab some video. It doesn't matter if you've made the video yourself or you're just grabbing it from online. Put it in there, put some transitions and cuts in it, get it about a half an hour or more in length, and then render that out on your computer in 4K or 1080 or whatever you want, and look at how much time that's going to take. Then put a faster drive or a slower drive in and see what difference that makes in your rendering time. In most cases, when it comes to video editing, a video editor doing the work will work for days. It's a lot of manual labor to cut, to do the editing, right? What's involved in editing? Sweetening the sound, putting in B-roll, inserting different angles at the right time, transitions, playing it all back so it flows right, it looks right. The very final step is the render. That's when you put in hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of work. You watched it back dozens of times, so it's looking like it's supposed to, the way you want it to. And then finally you can say, now render this as a master file. Now, as an editor, I can tell you, the least of my concerns is how long that render is going to take. The part that took the longest amount of time was gathering the content, followed by editing the content. The rendering of the content doesn't matter from my perspective, or for any perspective of, when I was doing videos over at Newegg. They didn't care. They could set that to render and go home for the night. They could set that to render and then start the next project on the same machine. Didn't really matter one way or the other. That project rendering time, if we can get it down from a 2-hour render time to a 1-hour render time, even if that were possible by changing out the storage drive, it still doesn't necessarily justify the expense. So they can post the video an hour earlier when likely the video isn't going to go up to the next day anyway, right? Because once it's rendered, it's got to be looked at and approved by management in this case and uploaded. But you can try this yourself, and it'll only cost you your time to utilize your current storage. And many people have more than one computer, so if you don't have more than one storage drive, just try the render on one computer, take that same project file, import it over to the other computer, run it on there. Even a built-in GPU will do the rendering. So people are just they get hung up on these numbers, and so I'm trying to figure out if I'm missing something that people would universally have a benefit from it, apart from the exceptions. There's always exceptions. And the people who are the exceptions, they know who they are, and they are generally not going to let money get in their way. But I do see people quite often who are going to receive no noticeable benefit, spend money they don't have for something they absolutely don't benefit from. And I scratch my head and I'm like, well, what's happening here? If we're all looking for bargains and we're all looking for a good deal, why are we so quick to overpay for something because it has RGB lights on it, or because it's rated at a faster speed, unless we ourselves are being held up by our computers? And if you are, what is it? That's my question. What are you using your computer for that's holding you up? In my experience, the users hold up the computer. The computer doesn't hold up the users. Except on the fringe, the vast majority of users are the bottleneck to the computer. So I'm just curious. I know some of you are the exceptions, and I'm just curious, what makes you the exception? A genuine and sincere question. I'm going to just look back through. I missed a few other contributions here. So a quick shout out and thank you to Don Allen. Don contributes via Super Chat $20. He says, hey, Kerry, here's a little something to use as you need. Right on. Thank you, Don. And Mike Visions with a £5 contribution. Hey, Kerry, thanks for sharing your experience and wisdom to those who understand and see the benefits and to those who are seeking knowledge. That's all I'm trying to do, Mike. I am not trying to sell anybody anything, but I would like you to make an informed decision and have proper expectations. That's all. And thank you for your contribution. John Craig with a £10 contribution said, high-speed NVMe drives are great in synthetic benchmarks, but in real life, I can't tell the difference. Yeah, most people will never be able to. Like I've done this. I've swapped out customers' drives for higher performance drives, customers in offices whose systems I build and maintain. And then I wait and I see if I hear anything from the customer, because I don't tell them I did it. I'll come in at night when the business is closed and I'll say, let's see what happens if I upgrade this. Nothing. So, I mean, nothing ever. So the next time the customer calls me, or I call the customer and say, hey, have you noticed anything different with your computer lately? Does it seem like it's any faster? And quite often now they're concerned. Should it be? I'm not saying it should or it shouldn't. I'm simply asking you if you've noticed, does it seem like it's any faster or any slower in the last week or whenever it was? Well, now that you mention it, it does seem slower. Really? All right. Well, that's interesting because I upgraded your drive to one that runs 2 to 3 times faster than what you had. And I was just kind of curious if you were going to notice a difference. It absolutely is not slower. That's an interest. I wasn't expecting that. But that's good to know, and I appreciate the feedback. So now I know not to recommend that upgrade for any of that office's employees because it's a waste of money. I have yet to have an office where that would be justifiable to spend that kind of money and see any performance difference. Which isn't to say they don't exist, but they're pretty rare, at least in my world. Sarge Tech contributes $5 via Super Chat. Hey, Kerry and friends, my solid state drive saved my bacon when I dropped my laptop while it was running. If it had been a mechanical drive, it may have been toast. Yeah, well, his laptops can be quite fragile, and the fact that you didn't crack your screen or, have any serious damage is impressive. But yeah, it's walking around with a laptop that's powered on in general is not recommended, but you do what you got to do. And just because it's a solid state drive doesn't mean that you're always going to survive that kind of a situation. But in this case, you did. Either way, you should always have backups of anything important. So all you'd have to do is replace the drive, easy peasy, and then just put your data back on. It'd be no big deal. But definitely solid state drives, because they're just a circuit board, there's no moving parts, they're much more robust. You could still kill them. They're not indestructible, but they're definitely not as fragile as a mechanical drive, that's for certain. Still, you want backups regardless. Feral Sparky says, Kerry, I've been slowly replacing PCs at the company I work for that were purchased due to the ultra low price and not if it's the right PC for the job. Yeah, I see that constantly. Yeah, and look, it keeps me in business, so it's hard for me to complain. I've had customers who, for example, have HP computers with HP keyboards and HP printers and HP monitors because they were under the impression that everything had to be HP to be compatible. And when I finally had an opportunity, to be aware of them, when they came to me and said, can you help us? I was like, of course I can help you. First of all, you don't have to, they're complaining about the HP support's terrible. They experienced, frustrations and many cases where HP support made a bad situation worse. So you don't have to have an HP computer. You don't have to have an HP monitor. You don't have to have an HP printer. I don't? No, that's the wonderful world of PC. If you're in the world of Apple, things get locked down. and they charge a lot of money for that. So there are still users out there who don't fully understand the compatibility of what it is for something to be a PC, who absolutely would not see a difference in getting them a higher performance drive, so long as it's in line with the rest of the computer. So in other words, if they had this HP that's 4 years old, and I'm building them a new machine, and I'm doing just an $800, 8-year budget build, that machine's going to be a rocket ship to them, and it doesn't have to use a super fast NVMe. The budget Intel drive is going to be so much faster than what they're used to. And the freedom to know that they can buy any monitor and any printer, and they don't have to call HP support. They're going to call me for support. It's really understanding where the money is going, right? So am I benefiting from putting this money over here? Or am I benefiting from putting the money over here? Or am I benefiting for keeping the money in my bank account? Taco says, do the most expensive shoes attract the best looking people? I guess some people would say yes to that. I get a lot of flack because I don't notice things. Somebody might say, how does this look? It looks great. Well, then how come you didn't tell me it looked great? Wasn't thinking about it. It didn't stand out as being bad. So, and I realize that can hurt people's feelings. Like, I went through a lot of effort. You could say, hey, that looks good. Absolutely. Absolutely. But I'm more about looking past that stuff. I'm more about seeing into the person. And if I'm drawn to that person, or if I have a relationship with that person, then it's about the person. It's not about what they wear. But for other people, I've known people that have an obsession with shoes, and not just females. I had a friend of mine that had to buy every pair of Nikes, sometimes duplicates. Very rarely wore them, but it was almost like a Pokemon collection. He's got to have the full set. It was I thought, very bizarre, but it's their money, and if that's how they want to spend it, if they want to drop $200 on a pair of shoes they're never going to wear, who am I to say that they shouldn't? But I would definitely say it's unusual. Doesn't make it wrong. I myself typically have one pair of shoes until they're worn out. Only recently, later in life, have I been able to afford buying more than one pair of shoes. And then when I do, all the new shoes are still new in the box. It's like I wait for one pair to get worn out, and then it's like, okay, I've got another pair I know fit that are slightly different. I know certain manufacturers and certain models of shoes they make are comfortable for me, so to mix it up, I'll get them in different designs. And then when the time comes, for whatever reason, I need to go to a different pair of shoes, then I have those there waiting for me. And if I'm in the mood and I have the extra money and I feel like I'm going to go buy an extra set of shoes just to have, typically I get, I go to Zappos, I order them, and then they sit in a box for months. I don't even try them on. I already know that's the size that fits from that manufacturer, and that's a design I like. I'll just get them in a color, that I don't already have. And when I wear out the shoes I'm wearing, they go in the trash can and come out in a new pair of shoes. But that, for me, is very unusual. I think I have 3 pairs of brand new shoes in a box. I haven't even so much as tried them on, but I already know they're going to fit. And they're my backups. I guess that's how I treat them, as backups. I mean, I don't really look at my shoes. I don't really look at other people's shoes, but I do know people who do. A lot of people do that. But in my world, you see I wear a t-shirt, I wear Levi's. I want to be comfortable. I don't care about impressing people with how I dress. I will admit that on the rare occasion that I get dressed up, I'm like, hey, that looks pretty good. but I'm still me. You know, anybody who knows me would say, it doesn't look right on you. All right, let me just keep scrolling through the chat here. Ben Fitzpatrick says, Kerry, I have an RX 560 GPU that I've tried on 3 different motherboards, and the last one is brand new, and it gets no power, no fan turning, nothing. The PC boots off of the APU graphics on the CPU. I don't know what to do. Well, it sounds like you've got a bad graphics card. Everything you're describing is a graphics card that's failed. And when they fail, because they're system-mounted components, you can't really see where it's bad. In most cases, you'd have to have a trained eye and specialty tools to identify it. In all likelihood, it sounds like the card is dead. If the card's under warranty, I would send it back to the manufacturer. If the card is not under warranty, it's just a burned out card. It's like I got a light bulb and I put it in 3 different sockets and it just doesn't turn on. It sounds like you got a bad light bulb. Well, but it's an LED. Aren't they supposed to last X amount of years? On average, but not guaranteed that every one will last a certain amount of time. Some may burn out in a matter of hours or days for whatever reason. If it's under warranty, you send it back, you get it replaced. If it's not under warranty, you recycle it, throw it away, replace it. It sounds to me like you have a bad GPU. Elko said he upgraded his CPU, answering my earlier question, who's upgraded only the CPU and kept the motherboard and everything else the same? So Elko in the chat says, I upgraded a 5820K to a 6850K. That's a pretty minor little upgrade. Did you notice much of a difference? Hallie said, I went from a 2400G to a 5700G. Yeah, that makes sense. I could see that. Shane Perkins in the chat said he went from a 486SX to a 486DX. You know what? You could have just got the what was it called? A 487, the math coprocessor? Forgot what they called that. A lot of motherboards back in the day had a separate socket on the motherboard that was optional to put a math coprocessor in that you could buy separately, or you could buy the CPU with the math coprocessor built into it. So a 486SX had no math coprocessor. The DX did have a math coprocessor. They were actually the same chip, just that the math coprocessor was effectively disabled or non-functional on the SX version, and the SX version sold for less money. Who needed a math coprocessor? Not many people actually needed it. Depended on the software that you were using. Patrick Gurzot said he's upgraded an i7 4770 to a 7700K. And you did that just by swapping the chip onto the same board? Let's see, socket 4770 is an 1151. And what was it, what year did you upgrade it to? 77? You went from a 4th gen to a 7th gen. Yeah, same socket, 1151. Yeah, that's a reasonable upgrade, you know, to move forward a few generations ahead. But you can see from the response in the chat room, not many of you have done this. I'm not saying nobody's done it. I'm saying your average consumer does not upgrade their CPU. Usually when it comes to upgrading, they replace the machine, or they end up replacing, you know, the do-it-yourselfers, the motherboard, CPU, and RAM altogether. And maybe even the storage. If the system's older and has a SATA storage, they typically want to move into NVMe storage for one reason or another. It is faster, it's easier to install. Thomas Tidwell contributes $10 via Super Chat. Thank you, Thomas. Elko says, I just had something weird. I noticed my new Ryzen 7000 integrated graphics working together with my NVIDIA 2080 Super. Is that supposed to be? Yeah, you can enable or disable your integrated graphics on your CPU in your BIOS. That way, if you want to hook up multiple monitors, just like the systems I build, whether they're AMD or Intel, you can use both cards at the same time. I have a couple of Dell XPS laptops that also auto switch between the integrated graphics and the 3050 Ti graphics, I think, is on them. Pretty sure. Anyway, yeah, they have an NVIDIA card as well as the integrated. It's normal, of course. Yeah. But if you didn't like that, you could go into your BIOS and disable your integrated graphics if that was confusing you for some reason. It's also going to consume a little bit of RAM, your integrated graphics. So if you want that RAM returned to you, you have to disable in the BIOS manually. Mm-hmm. William Dawson says, what's the point of upgrading your CPU when you're still limited by the motherboard's capabilities? You can't take advantage of all the features on a brand new, say, 7th gen Intel on a 4th gen motherboard. This is true, but there's still performance enhancements. But yes, it would run more effectively on a chipset that's designed to take advantage of everything that CPU can handle. The CPU may be able to handle more lanes of simultaneous data throughput, but not on the older motherboard. So that while you are getting some advantage, you're not getting the full advantage if you don't change out the board. This is true. But if they're not using the system in that way where they wouldn't notice it anyway, you know, one sometimes has to wonder if that upgrade was worth it. Sometimes it's just a project for people. But regardless of why they did it, the question was simply, even though you can, how many people actually do that? And as you can see from the responses in the chat room, it's few and far between. John Williams says he went from an AMD Athlon 200 GE to a Ryzen 5 5600G after upgraded the BIOS on a Gigabyte B450 motherboard. Yeah, I'm sure that was an upgrade worth doing. John Purser with a $5 contribution said this may be a bit off topic, but when I heard that Kia and Chevrolet will start manufacturing computer parts, I almost couldn't believe it. Well, you know, a lot remains to be seen. Now, I haven't heard anything about this, but it doesn't bother me or it doesn't concern me. I don't care who's making the parts. What I care about is, are they affordable? Are they in stock? And if I contact support, am I going to get a reasonably quick response? Or do I just go to like a dead letter box and have to wait and wait and wait for, you know, somebody to get back to me? I can't afford that in my business. I can't tell my customers, I don't have an answer yet. Customers want to know, when are you going to have an answer? I need to know. And I can't tell them, well, I'm not being told by the manufacturer, so there's nothing I can tell you. Customers will take their business somewhere else. In those cases, I would have to provide the customer a solution at my expense, you know, in the case of warranty situations. And then I would have to deal with returning the product or whatever the issue was with the product between me and the manufacturer in my own time. And then I would consider that before I ever use that manufacturer's parts again. So I don't care who the manufacturer is. I don't care if Chevrolet is making motherboards. Are they good motherboards? If there's a problem with the motherboard, are they quick to respond to any support issues? Are they affordable and are they in stock? I don't care who makes it. As long as, you know, that manufacturer has a reputable business practices and reputable parts, more than happy to purchase them as much as anybody else. Anthony says, what's your opinion on going from a Gen 3 NVMe to Gen 4? Well, that's what I was just saying in this video. In most cases, you won't see any benefit at all. But you might be one of the rare cases that does. So you'd have to tell me how much are you looking to spend and what way to use the computer that you think it would be beneficial. That's not something I can tell you. You have to tell me. That's why I say people get caught up in all this marketing hype. If you're one of those people that likes to see big benchmark numbers and you have the money to pay for it, don't let me get in your way. But I'd have to have some understanding as to what is it that you're using your computer for that you would even consider this. How would this benefit you? If, let's just say, if an NVMe Gen 4 drive, if I said to you, yes, you would benefit from an NVMe Gen 4 drive, your next question should be, how would I benefit? And if I said, well, it's faster, then your next question should be faster, like give me an example. Will my system boot any faster? Probably not noticeably. When I load my applications, will they load any faster? Depends on the application. But you said it's faster. Well, yes, if you run benchmark numbers, universally you'll see it is faster than your Gen 3 drive. How does that play out in real life depends on how you use your computer. And most people will not even see a difference. It'll be milliseconds between the fast one and the slower one, between the Gen 3 and the Gen 4. Are you most people? It's really a decision you have to make. Nobody can make that decision for you, but when you watch these reviews on YouTube, a lot of these reviews are bought and paid for by the drive manufacturers. You're watching an advertisement. I can appreciate that people like free content, but free content is called a commercial most of the time. So most of the big tech channels, or heck, any big YouTube channel on any subject matter, is almost always a percentage of the content that channel is making is bought and paid for by a sponsor. They are effectively making advertisements. And you might have an ad blocker to skip the ads that might be before the video or after the video. But the video itself on these big YouTube channels, more often than not, is nothing more than a big commercial. So if you enjoy free content, then you enjoy watching commercials for the most part, at least when it comes to the big YouTube channels. Now the smaller channels, they're too small typically to have sponsors, and as a result, they're making content from their heart, right? They're doing it because that's an art for them. It's like the reason an artist might paint, or a writer might write, or a sculptor might sculpt. Well, yes, an author can be paid to write a press release for a new product. An artist can be paid to draw that product. But that's typically only going to happen from more well-known artists versus, someone just starting out. Some people are like, I don't want to pay for the content on YouTube. That's fine. Enjoy the commercials. That's all I'm saying. These videos are just a big advertisement. Like in the movie, you guys remember the movie Demolition Man, where they're listening on the radio to commercial jingles, and those are the hot songs that the people in the future are listening to? It's kind of absurd, right? Some people have expressed some resistance that they shouldn't have to pay for the content. You don't. But consider the content you're watching for free, especially the popular content. Really look at it. You're essentially being sold a product. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that business model, but I don't think a lot of people put that together. So when I do my videos here, I try to avoid falling into that trap because I'm a real working computer technician. I've got to worry about my integrity, me personally. It's my own hang up. My own ego problem is I don't want to be a sellout. But when there is a product that I truly use and truly endorse because I think it's a good value, it's something I use in my business, then I absolutely want to take them on as a sponsor. And I inadvertently are making commercials for products I believe in, but I'm not being told what videos to make or how to make them, and then have to submit them to the sponsor for them to approve it before I can air it. And as a result, it means I don't have the kind of money to throw around that some of these big YouTube channels do. But it also means the source of my content and the reason why I make it is coming from my heart. It's not coming from my wallet. I'm not looking for what's the biggest payday for me. I'm looking for what's the most valuable content I can create that is unique, that you just don't see normally on YouTube. And that's what this channel is all about. But yes, you can watch commercials all day, every day, and it'll cost you $0.00. And it's likely not going to change unless you pay for the content. So just adjust your expectations, right? If you want to enjoy free content and you don't mind constantly being sold stuff, that's great. But if you're saying, Carrie, can you do this build or can you review that product? Well, unless somebody's sending me that product, somebody has to pay for it. And if a sponsor is paying for it, if the manufacturer is paying for it, can I truly be honest? If the manufacturer is paying me to review their product, things I don't like about the product won't upset me as much because I'm getting paid. I don't have any investment in it, right? So I'll be far more gentle about the product's shortcomings, or what I think are the product's shortcomings, versus if I spend my own hard-earned money to buy a product and it doesn't live up to the hype, I'm going to be angry. I'm going to feel like I've been duped or lied to, misled and deceived. I can, let you know just how upset I am about it. I won't get that upset if the product didn't cost me anything, and especially if the manufacturer is paying me. So inadvertently, just in human nature alone, it would be illogical for me to be as upset and as offended for something that was given than something I reached out and paid for. Likewise, if you're watching free content, it's very difficult to take anybody's complaint seriously who isn't paying for the content. So in much the same way, when people are paying for the content and they don't like what they're seeing, they have a right to be upset because they feel like they paid for something and they got something else. So they feel tricked, they feel deceived. But when people feel tricked or deceived on the free content that they chose to click on, nobody held a gun to their head and said, hey, you have to watch this. They saw it, they clicked on it, and then they didn't like it, and they want to make sure the content creator knows. I'm going to write it all in caps. I imagine this is how they type. It's preposterous, it's absurd. So in order for me to continue to make the videos the way that I want to make them, and I consider that sort of an art, right? To be able to present what I do in a way that I don't think is very common. What holds me back from making more content? At the end of the day, somebody's got to pay for it. So if you notice, there are some times when I go longer without content than other times, that's because the financials. That's all it is, usually. Or it means I'm off doing something else for a customer. I still have my computer business that I'm running, and things have been pretty mellow. It got kind of hyped, super busy during the beginning of COVID. Everybody wanted remote access, and everybody needed webcams, and everybody needed to be able to Zoom, and they needed newer computers. That was a good solid 18 months of just busy, busy, busy. Things are starting to get back to normal, and people, for the most part, now have newer machines. They have the webcams, all of that stuff. So this business kind of goes in waves. And that's just another wave. You never know when they're coming. It always happens. Something happens. And so I can't do this and that at the same time. And I do my best to manage my time and sometimes I'm better at it than others. I've had a few people reach out and say, what happened to Carrie? I haven't seen any new videos in months. Because what's happened is when you click on my channel now, and this has been this way for a while, but some people haven't noticed, YouTube separates out the videos. They segregate uploaded videos from live videos and YouTube Shorts under their own separate tabs. So if you were to look up my channel and you just went to the default results, you're just going to see the last video I published was when I was back in Michigan. But above that, it says live. And if you click on live, you'll see a bunch of content I've created since then. And people, some people, are saying, well, where'd Carrie go? I'm still here. They're not able to find me. Do you think those people would benefit from having a faster NVMe drive? That's the point I'm trying to make, is certainly there are people who will, but they do not make up the average. There are a very small percentage of people that would be able to justify that added expense for a true benefit. And I think it's worth considering when you're spending your money. You know, just have a proper expectation of what you're getting and what end result it's really going to have for you. And then make the decision that's right for you. Gary Tatum said there's a cool browser plugin called uBlock Origin that works great to block YouTube ads. So my biggest or most common support call in the last 2 years now has been the result of browser extensions. And if the end user didn't put the browser extension on, they wouldn't be having the problem. So just last week, customers said they couldn't pull up a FedEx tracking number. Page couldn't be loaded. I said, well, what's the tracking number? They gave me the tracking number. I Googled it. Page came up just fine. I said, try a different browser. So they, went from whatever browser they were using to like Microsoft Edge or whatever. And they said, well, I'll be darned. It's a browser difference. I go, no. It's that your regular browser you've been using, more than likely you have added an extension. And, the websites that you're getting free content from, the way that that's getting paid for is from the ads. So if you block the ads, you're effectively stealing. And, you're not, that's the arrangement. The arrangement is we're going to give you this content, but in exchange, you're going to watch these ads. Or you could pay for, in this case, YouTube Premium for, $10 a month or whatever it is. And you get, everything's ad free, and even the content creators you do watch get paid more from your view than they would if you're watching for free. Anyway, but what the websites will do is, of course, they're aware that things like uBlock Origin are blocking their ads. So they rewrite the website where the website won't show you the content. So now I end up getting a phone call. How come my browser won't load this page? And more times than not, it is a browser extension that is causing it. I've had people say, I would play, they have an Amazon Music and they play it in the background while they're working, and now all of a sudden it doesn't work anymore. It's a browser plugin. But that browser plugin, I've had it forever. I understand that. But the people who write the code for the Amazon Music to be, built in like that, they have made it in such a way that your browser plugin is now blocking it. And the browser plugin doesn't tell you it's blocking it. It just doesn't work. So whenever you're having a problem loading a website, the first thing you should do is try a different browser. The second thing you should do is load a version of the browser without any of the extensions. I'd say 8 times out of 10, that solves the problem. So these browser extensions, they work for a little while, but then the websites change because they don't want you getting the content if you're blocking the ads. So they're going to change it. And it might take a while for the browser extension then to get enough reports from end users to say, hey, this isn't working. So then it's a constant cat and mouse. It'll never just stay fixed. It's something you're going to keep chasing after. So if you don't mind having to turn the browser extension off for certain websites or replace the browser extension and do the research with your time to resolve why something isn't loading for you, but it's seemingly loading for everybody else, you likely did it to yourself, and you did it because you were trying to block the ads, but you were saying, okay, this was our arrangement. I'm going to watch the ads and you're going to give me the content. And what you're doing is you're reneging on your deal, and you're saying, I'm going to take the content, but I'm not going to watch the ads. And they get smart to that because it starts costing them money. They're losing money then. So they either then are forced to have to charge for it, or they simply change the coding of the site to not work with that. Sometimes the site will come up and say, we're noticed that you're using an ad blocker and our site generates revenue solely from ads. And sometimes the site will ask you, will you turn the ad blocker off? And you can say yes or no. Sometimes the website says, until you turn the ad blocker off or you pay to be a subscriber, you cannot visit our website. So the nasty things that people are doing, they're getting nasty things happening right back to them. So there are consequences. It's not like you're just going to download a browser extension and you don't have to watch any more ads ever again. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way. It will start creating problems, typically in the form of websites not loading properly. You won't understand why. It will make no sense. And when you figure out that it's your browser extension, which in most cases was also free, it's really hard for you to have anybody to complain to who's going to listen, because it was free. And that browser extension is also monitoring every website you go to in most cases and selling this information to prospective advertisers, to marketing companies, ironically enough. There's nothing I like better than when a YouTube video pops up and it's got a banner ad that says, click here to stop banner ads. Am I the only one that finds that hilarious? It was like back in the day when people had fax machines and some company would print out, a 15-page catalog of fax machine paper they sell, using up all of your fax paper. It's the same old shtick. It's just been going on for years. Each person thinks they're outsmarting the other one. It's to stand to the sideline and watch these two parties essentially do the same thing back and forth to each other, and neither one really gaining any ground or actually accomplishing anything. I find it slightly amusing. Well, it's more than slightly amusing. And the fact that it's been going on for 30 years, I suspect it's probably going to go on the rest of my life. But, you don't have to be in that, participating in that big circle. Just be aware of it. At least that way you'll know what's going on. It'll all make sense to you. Jason Willis says YouTube Premium is only $9.99 a month with no ads. I love YouTube Premium. They keep throwing more and more ads on videos. It's really getting annoying. And I was like, you know what? I should have YouTube Premium anyway. I mean, I make money from YouTube, and so to give a little bit back to YouTube. Don't get me wrong, YouTube takes 45% of everything I make every month and 30% of every Super Chat contribution. So it's not like I'm not giving YouTube enough. You'd think YouTube would give their content creators of a certain amount of volume free YouTube Premium for being a reason why people come to YouTube. However, they don't do that. I would have to pay the same as you. And I do, and I don't regret it. Yeah, don't regret that at all. Nothing I hate worse than wanting to see a movie trailer and I have to sit through an ad before I can watch the ad. It's preposterous. So, and those browser extensions are not always free either. Sometimes instead of giving that money to YouTube or whatever, you're giving it to the extension. And if you're not giving it to the extension, they're making their money. They're paying for that distribution of the extension, development and testing of the extension, and the support and maintenance of the extension by selling the information they're collecting about you for everywhere you go on the web. If you have a browser extension, in all likelihood, it is watching everything you do. Just so you know, you are still paying for it. You're just paying for it in a different way. Bonsai Buddy. Ray Toth mentions Bonsai Buddy. Yeah, that one was pretty horrible. Yeah. But if you have YouTube Premium, you should know that when you watch content, on YouTube, the content creators make more money from every minute you watch, like 3 or 4 times more money than if you're just a free watching user. So consider that's a very it's a great way to avoid the ads where you're not playing cat and mouse with the ad blocker being blocked, and then you have to update it or fix it or replace it with a different one. And you've got to spend that time diagnosing, and whatever it was you were trying to get done isn't getting done now, because now your main goal is to try and figure out how come the website's not coming up anymore when it used to. And then eventually you'll get to figure it out, and you'll, oh, it was the ad blocker. It was this browser extension. Like I said, most of the repair calls I've gotten, the support calls, most of them, more than 50%. I don't know exactly if it's 80%, but most of the time they're browser extension related problems that the user inflicted upon themselves, typically from watching a YouTube video or reading an article online that recommended it. And based on nothing more than that, downloaded it, they said, hey, this works. And then all of a sudden one day, certain sites stop working. It could be a week later, it could be a month later, it could be a year later. So it's not first on their mind a lot of times of why this isn't working. When it used to work, they immediately start, digging in their registry or looking up drivers, and then I'm just like, oh, you're completely breaking your computer now over a browser extension that you didn't need to have that's causing the problem. And, I shouldn't complain. I make good money, honestly, to just log in remotely to somebody's computer and disable that extension for them. And a lot of times that's all that needs to be done. And I advise them, stay away from those browser extensions, unless you absolutely have to have it. And at the very least, if you do have it, be aware that if a website doesn't load, that's likely the first place you should check. And do know that they are pretty much universally, whatever browser extension you use, it is monitoring your activity and selling it, with few exceptions. But overall, you might be surprised how much information that is collected about you. And you might be okay with it, but I was okay with it until I actually saw how much there was. I was like, really? Oh, I have a problem with this. Nicholas Menard contributes 10 Canadian dollars, says, I bought the zip tie cutter from your Amazon list. And let me tell you, I am so glad I bought it. Thank you for your kindness and experience, Uncle Kerry. I'm glad I could catch you. Keep on rocking. Thanks, Nicholas. Yeah, the they're just angled wire cutters. I use them for clipping the zip ties. These are, I believe, are made in Italy. These are Italian. I sometimes wear them out where I got to put a lot of force to get it to cut anymore. So you'll see I always have a spare. I always have a backup, so it doesn't interfere with my flow of work. I can just chuck them in the trash, get another one. Once I open the brand new package up, I go on Amazon. When I have time, I order a spare. So in other words, when I start using my backup, I order a new replacement backup. Yeah, I love those pliers or wire cutters. Glad that you found, you saw the value in it as I did. William Lynn wants to know, how are the dogs doing back at Studio A? They're still the same? Yeah, they're still the same. I see Remus Computer Solutions joins us in the chat. John Williams says, I have Malwarebytes and it offers a browser guard. Is that an ad blocker? No, it's not an ad blocker. It's a malware blocker. Sometimes websites, especially if you're Googling things and you're clicking on unfamiliar sites looking for, whatever it is you're looking for, may try to infect your computer with add-ons or potentially unwanted programs, things of that nature. And so Malwarebytes will come up and let you know when a website is dangerous, but it does not block. It's not an ad blocker. Not in the sense that you could, pull up a YouTube video and then have Malwarebytes block the ad. I think for a while it did that, but then all these ad blockers, they only work temporarily. The websites like YouTube and other websites that exchange ads for content always are adapting their site, always. It's never done. It's always being worked on. So whatever like a lot of videos were Java-based, Flash-based. Not anymore. Everything's through HTML. What was it? HTML5. So everything got recoded. And it'll get recoded again and recoded again and recoded again as we continue to evolve the technology in both hardware and software, as well as try to force people to watch those ads no matter how much effort and time they put in to try not to watch the ads. It's only temporary, because what usually happens is the site won't load anymore. And then you're diagnosing a problem. Pikeman said, if it gets picked up as an ad blocker when I visit sites sometimes. I've not seen Malwarebytes. I use Malwarebytes. I use the browser guard. I think it's a wonderful tool. I've never had it block access to a site that wasn't justified. In other words, if you want to bypass Malwarebytes safety and disable it for that site, you can. But that's like saying, I don't care if the food is past its expiration date, I'm going to eat it anyway. If you want to endure that risk, you don't have at it. But that defeats the point of what Malwarebytes is installed for. Whatever that site is that Malwarebytes isn't letting you get to, probably isn't a good site. And I'm sure there's an alternative site you could be going to that will present the same or equivalent information to you without that, triggering Malwarebytes alerts. Just so you know. Remus Computer Solutions says, Carrie, I heard a sales video that Japan has a soda vending machine where you watch an ad for the soda. No money is accepted. They did that out here in Arizona, where they got sponsors to pay for bottled water that they were giving out to people on the super hot summer days, especially homeless people. And what they did is they wrapped the water bottle with the sponsor's name, and bottled water is very cheap. So it's something very cheap for the sponsors to be associated with. That's good PR for them. I don't know that it's generating any sales from homeless people who generally don't have money to spend, but it's a good way to align their company to say, we are giving back to the community. And this person, it was on the news this last summer, someone had this idea to do this and to give, they had refrigerated, they chilled the water down and they were giving it out on the really hot summer days. And not just the homeless people, anybody who wanted it could have one. And it was all paid for by sponsors. When I worked at Intel, there was a little joke we played. There were about 3 of us that worked next to each other, and we kind of, as we're working, we'd riff off of each other. And somebody would get thirsty or whatever and say, hey, I'm going to go get a soda from the vending machine. Does anybody else want one? And, my coworker would say, if you fly, I'll buy. In other words, if you're the one who walks the distance to where the vending machines were, so I don't have to, I'll pay for yours. And I remember how I responded to that. I looked at my watch and I went, hold on. Guy's like, what, do you want something or not? I go, yeah, I do. I want you to get me a Coke, but hold on. The guy's like, well, what? I want to go. What's it? I'm just, there, I just made the 50 cents. There you go. Because I was getting paid by the hour. So I'm like, all right, there, I just made 50 cents. Now go get me the Coke. So that was kind of sponsor paid for. It was paid for by the employer in a way. Cracked myself up. Star Sign says, in India, they were giving away discounts on phones. Sometimes they were free, but the catch is they would play random adverts on it. Well, I don't know if you've ever used Waze, W-A-Z-E, on your smartphone. I love Waze. It's a GPS that you never have to update the maps on. You just download the app for free from the Google Play Store or the iOS App Store, the Apple Store. And when you come to a stop, you might see an advertisement appear on it for, like, say there's a Burger King on the corner or around the corner. Hey, there's a special on Burger King. It doesn't interfere with your navigation. It provides you the best route. It tells you where there are police cars, accidents, road closures, detours. It does it all for you for free. But when you come to a stop, like at a stoplight, for example, you might see an advertisement pop up. It doesn't do anything on the audio. You'd have to look at it. And it'll say, you know, hey, 2 for $6 Arby's roast beef sandwich. It's right around the corner. And that's what's paying or helping to pay for that app, which constantly has to be updated, not only with roads and current traffic conditions, but also points of interest. Where there used to be a restaurant or a hotel may not be there anymore. Instead, it could be something else entirely different. Or in the case of Arizona, what was been a farm since the state became a state in 1912 is now a shopping center with a bunch of stores in it. And if you want to find the closest one near you, you have to have the latest update, or it's sending you to the closest one prior to the new one being built. So as you can tell, as you can imagine, there's a lot of money that goes into keeping maps like that up to date. And so it's a non-invasive way, I think, of providing the service free of cost. And of course, they know exactly where you are and where you're going and where you've been. So they are data collecting that as well. And that's another way that it gets paid for. They sell that data. Sean Boland in the chat says, I got a Toshiba touchscreen laptop and cleaned it thoroughly. It's an Intel Core i7-4990. It runs hot, but I've already changed the thermal paste. CPU is cooler now, virtually new. Yeah, well, a system like that, if it's a 4th generation Intel, it's what, 8 years old at least? Thermal compound, if the system is running hot, thermal compound removal and reapplication would be prudent. It's not very common though. Just because a machine is older doesn't mean you need to replace the thermal compound. But if the machine is older and it's running hot, yeah, there's probably a good reason why. In many cases, the inside of the laptop may never have been dusted. The heatsink fins could be completely clogged up. The fans may not be turning at full RPM, and the thermal compound may have degraded. So good job. Remus Computer Solutions says, I don't know if it's appropriate, but Amazon has the Asus Thor 850 watt platinum power supply for a steal of a price, $140, and it comes with individually sleeved cables. Power supply has an OLED panel to display real-time power use, which is likely to be covered, but still cool. Yeah, because you know how many people see the CPU once the system panels are on? Or, I mean, how many people see the PSU? I think I said CPU. Yeah, I don't know why that's beneficial though. For me personally, changing power supplies isn't very common. So to have to monitor the output of it seems like it's a gimmick. But hey, if you like that, have at it. I think $140 for a modular power supply that's only 850 watts is quite pricey. You should be able to pick that up for 90 bucks. You know, EVGA, for example, I'm sure has a power supply under 90 bucks, probably closer to 70 bucks. That's modular at 850 watts. But if it's worth it to you to pay extra for that, so you have an OLED screen that you may not even be able to see, and you think 140 is a good deal, it's fine with me. Sean wants to know, should I use a higher quality thermal paste? Yeah, I think you should. And I think you should then test the difference between whatever thermal paste you use and the more expensive thermal paste, and then come back and tell us if it was worth it. I would love to hear back from you on that, because I imagine you're going to see almost zero difference and it'll be a complete waste of money. But if I tell you that, you likely will be skeptical and not quite sure if what I'm telling you is true. So you would do us both a favor, since you're the one who's asking, you're the one who's curious, actually do it and then come back and let us know the results and tell us if you recommend it or regret it. Remus Computer Solutions agrees. He thinks it's a gimmick, but platinum, oh, it's a platinum. Okay, so if it's platinum rated 80 plus, those do get expensive. He said a platinum 850 watt is more like $180. Okay. He said if it was gold rated, it'd be more like 120, 130. And again, to some people that matters. To the average user, it probably won't matter. But if you had an office where you had 100 computers and they're all running inefficiently, it could cause a significant increase in your electric bill, as well as the heat they generate. You know, here in Arizona, it's already hot. So if we're going to add more heat inside the office, it means the air conditioner has to run longer and harder to get that air cooled back down. So having a more power efficient rated power supply that costs more money will likely save the company money in electricity bills. But for an end user, a single end user, that difference is probably so insignificant you wouldn't see it on your electric bill, at least not here in the United States. Larry Witt says, what do you think about the Intel PC stick? Well, I've reviewed, Azul has had a couple of those computers on a stick. They just plug them into the HDMI port of a television set and that's your monitor. And they're great for browsing the web, playing YouTube videos, Amazon Prime, Netflix, things like that. They're fine. I would say the only issue I have with them is it's not like a fully functioning PC in that they can overheat if you really utilize them the way you would a desktop computer. Like I wouldn't edit and render a video on one. It will likely overheat and shut down. So on the other hand, it doesn't make sense to have some super high-end home theater PC when all you're using it for is playing movies or music. So it is a tool like any other, and when used properly, it's wonderful. But if used improperly, it can be very, very frustrating. I think Mitch Morrison is still using the Azul 3 or Azul 4 in the back of one of his TVs for just basic web browsing and YouTube playback and Netflix playback, which is really all they're designed to do. So if it meets your needs, they're very inexpensive. You cannot upgrade them at all. If it breaks out of warranty, you throw it away. It's disposable. You just throw it away. James Brezzi with a $10 super chat says, I just upgraded my Ryzen 3090X to a Ryzen 5900X. Just got done swapping them out and giving the PC a good dusting. The CPU was on sale for $350. Both Amazon and Best Buy have all Ryzen CPUs on sale. Good to know. Good to know. And Remus Computer Solutions says, my personal system is a 5900X Ryzen and I really like it. Nakiba Evans in the chat wants to know what liquid cooler is on the streaming computer here. That's an NZXT Z63. Remus Computer Solutions says, I put my money where my mouth is and bought a bunch of custom loop parts to show that all-in-one coolers are good. To get a 10-degree Celsius drop on a 12900K, I needed about $600 in parts. Well, but you're overclocking, so I mean, I get that. But for the rest of us, who cares about a 10-degree difference? If you don't know who Anthony Remus is, he has a computer shop, custom builds computers out of Las Vegas or around Las Vegas, and he does very detail-oriented work and very highly customized systems. The overclocking that he offers, the amount of testing he has to put in to find the stable overclock, plus the warranty he offers, it's expensive. But you'll get a machine that you can't buy at Best Buy. You know, you'll get a machine that even if you went to one of the boutique builders, you don't know the build quality on it. Those boutique builders might have a good builder one day and a crappy builder the next day. Anthony's a self-employed guy like myself, and he does all of his own work, like I do all my own work. So everything is done consistently, exactly the same, with the same quality control requirements that are extraordinarily and painstakingly long. I'm sure Anthony can test an average overclock system at least a full 5 days, 5 full working days before it's good enough to release out to the customer, and then has to support it for 3 years, or at least that's what he was doing. I couldn't spend that much time with one customer. I don't make that much money to do it. I would help 5 customers. But that's his business model, and that's what he enjoys doing. And that kind of talent in this industry is pretty rare. And Lindis joins us. Hey, welcome in, Alan. Remus Computer Solutions says, I wanted to show my clients that all-in-one coolers are quite good. But yeah, to overclock the new stuff, all-in-one coolers are reaching their limits. So are the CPUs. I mean, the CPUs are mostly overclocking themselves now anyway. Kind of feel like overclocking is really a thing of the past when your biggest gains are like maybe 15% tops. And what it costs you extra to get that 15%, boy, I'll tell you what, you must be doing something with that computer to justify spending an extra $600 for just 15% increase. And clearly some people are. But the average computer user wouldn't see any benefit from that. He knows that too, and he's not selling to the average computer user generally. I don't think that's his bread and butter. I'm sure his bread and butter are design firms. And yeah, he says, I agree. That's why I've not done any overclocking on 11th gen. Paused on 12th gen due to limited time. Tooling up to offer overclocking again with 13th gen. Yeah, unfortunately, we're living in a time where it's like, to heck with the ecology, to heck with global warming. Let's just put more power, more voltage into the CPU to make it go faster. It's like the muscle car era. Who cares about the gas mileage? Just here's the 800 horsepower, Dodge Hellcat. Who cares? And now it's like, okay, there won't be any new muscle cars from Dodge. Next year, it'll all be electric. So I think we're going to look back at this era, this time we're in now, and seeing what AMD and Intel are doing by just dumping voltage to get more performance. It's creating a massive amount of heat. These newer chips are much harder to cool, generally speaking. And the amount of power they can consume when they're being worked is higher than, I think, any other consumer chip in the history of consumer chips. That needs to change. It needs to change for the survivability of the planet. It's putting the priority of performance over sustainability. So that's not something that can continue much longer. And mark my words, they're going to go back to being more power efficient. It's not a genius idea to go faster by throwing more voltage into it. And that's not an engineering marvel. That's just basic 101 engineering. That's simple, mindless, throw more voltage at it. And you can only do that so much before you just reach pinnacles of, she can't take much more cotton, she's gonna blow. That's a terrible accent, isn't it? I got that, I'm doing all she can. It's doing all she can. It's breaking up. Carrie, are you missing Michigan? Always. I'm always missing Michigan. Are you kidding me? I don't miss it as much when the weather in Arizona cools down. But of course, when the weather cools down, the amount of traffic goes up. A lot of people from colder states will come to Arizona for the wintertime. And then when their state starts to warm back up and Arizona's getting super, super hot, during that transition, they often go back. And then if you live in Arizona like I do, in Phoenix, it gets super, super hot. We have over 100 days in a row of temperatures of 100 degrees or higher every year. And I think this July, I think, was the hottest July on record. So I miss the culture of Michigan, the way the people treat each other. I miss the news of, like, if you pull up a Grand Rapids, Michigan news site and read the news, just randomly any day, even now, and then pull up any news site for Phoenix and read about how many people were hit and killed by cars, how many people were shot. I laugh because it's absurd. Every day, every single day, at least one person is hit and killed by a car, and at least one person is shot. Minimum, every day. Look at the Grand Rapids news, maybe once a week. So it's also a major population difference, more people, more problems. But yeah, that's my goal. My goal will be to get back home. Born and raised in Detroit, that defined who I am as a person. And I just feel like I am a visitor in Arizona. I don't feel like I belong here. And when I go back to Michigan, it feels like home. I don't have that feeling of not belonging. I'm sure it's all in my head, but I can't deny it. And I've asked people that have seen me in Michigan if they think I'm different in Michigan than I am in Arizona. And universally, everybody says yes. They're like, yeah, it's not just in your head. Like, we can tell. And like, all right, well, I mean, it doesn't change anything. I'm still going. But it's interesting that it's not just in my head, in the sense that other people can see I'm more relaxed and I seem happier there. So what's that worth? How much would you pay for peace of mind? I tried to buy some at Walmart the other day, but they said they don't stock it. The goal for me is to have Studio C in Michigan. That's the goal. So I'll still be doing what I'm doing. I can do this from anywhere in the world. I just need a broadband connection to do live. I don't need a broadband connection if I want to create and upload videos. But if I want to interact live with you guys, absolutely have to have broadband for that. So if you asked a question and I haven't addressed it, it's likely because I haven't seen it. So I'm going to just give you a minute here to write your question. I'm going to step off the screen and grab a Gatorade because I've been talking so much. I'm a bit parched. Parched, I said. How long have we been on now? Oh, we're just shy of 2 hours. You know what? I think 2 hours is a good place to wrap it up. So unless you guys keep me hanging around with questions, we'll probably wrap up here pretty soon. Let me check my email and see if I've missed any contributions or notices that way. Yes, $10 from Gary Tatum was contributed via PayPal. Thank you, Gary Tatum. If you guys are just now hearing me asking the question about who upgraded their processor, you're way behind. If you want to keep up with us, hit the refresh button on your browser to get make sure that little progress bar is all the way to the right so that you can be watching the latest content. Of course, you may not even hear this for a half an hour, but just so other people in the chat understand what's happening. Sometimes I disable DVR mode because I end up getting people answering questions I asked a half an hour ago. That's okay. It's just can throw people off. Like, what are they talking about? They're talking about something we were discussing a half an hour ago, but they don't realize it. And Remus Computer Solutions says, next time I'm in Arizona, I want to check out Kara's Pen Company. What is that? If you are into pens, they manufacture some nice stuff. You know, pens, there's a long story there. I won't get into it, but suffice to say, there's an inside joke in my family when it comes to collecting pens. Just stupid pens for no apparent reason. And yeah, it's something I'm trying to break myself of. So that would not be a good place for me to go. Sort of like an alcoholic visiting a beer factory. Yeah, probably not the best thing to do. Remus Computer Solutions says, I'm not allowed to buy any more pens. I have 4 of them. Did I see Peter Laycock's contribution? I did not. I did not see that. So let me scroll up. What did I miss? Unfortunately, I don't have any record of it. And YouTube isn't showing me any viewer activity. So not only did I not see it, I still don't see it. But my thanks, of course, to Peter Laycock for all of his contributions. He has really been critical and really responsible for about 50% of the content I make. I've only been able to make because of his support. One person has made that big of a difference. Now, everybody else who supports, that all adds up. But nobody has been as generous and as regularly generous as Peter Laycock. And I think he deserves the recognition that without him, probably 50% of the builds and other content that I've done here on the channel, I would not have been able to do. Because as I started this video off saying is, I don't want to just take on sponsorship and just build things that the manufacturers want me to promote, whatever they're pushing this month. I want to build what I want to build. I want to review what I want to review. And I want it to tie in with my business, something that I would recommend to a client, something that I would have to support after the sale. And boy, I'll tell you, I had a customer who wanted to, they wanted to put security cameras in their office. And they got this idea to run 10 gigabit networking cable. Like it's this really expensive, very difficult to wire. It's difficult to punch it down. And I'm like, why? So I don't know, that's what we're gonna do. I said, well, I don't do that. So we wanna put these security cameras in. Okay. You know, we can put some basic security. Oh no, we don't want basic security cameras. I want fancy security cameras. So I'm like, you know, I really can't help you with any of this. This isn't what I do. They said, that's all right. We found somebody that's going to do it. Well, then the person came in and did it, didn't consult with me, took their whole network offline, brought it back up under a different IP address, and didn't change the IP address on anything that was hard-coded. So most of their printers wouldn't print anymore. It was a nightmare. Then they said to me, can you help us fix this problem we have now with our new, you know, something to deal with the network? And I said, I don't know if I can help you or not, because the equipment you installed was enterprise level equipment I don't work on that level of equipment. Usually it's big corporations that have full-time IT staff that work with stuff like this. You're a little tiny law firm. You have like 12 employees. This whole thing doesn't make any sense to me unless you're opening up a data center. I said, you know, you've sort of outgrown me. They have this Ubiquity Dream Machine, and you know, it's got these bizarre, weird ways of logging into it and weird restrictions, and I'm completely unfamiliar with it. And I said to the client, I said, look, man, I may not be able to help you anymore. Like, you've gone around me on all this stuff. I wasn't consulted. I wasn't included. I don't know what this other person set up, but I know I had to fix the mess they made. Now the hard work is done. They've configured it, and I have a backup file of the configuration settings of the router. I don't know what they are, but I could put it back. You know, I know enough that I can restore the settings if we had to do that, but this is out of my pay level. Like, it's out of my wheelhouse. And they said, well, we really want you to work on it. We don't want to lose you. I said, yeah, but I would never have put this in, and I don't want to have to learn it because you're the only customer that's got it. It's nothing I wanted to learn. You're sort of directing my career, right? You're telling me what I have to learn and what I have to support. That's the whole reason I became self-employed, is so that an employer wouldn't put me in a position of changing my career path. So I said, you know, I will do my best to help you, but I'm telling you right now, I have no idea what I'm doing with this equipment. No idea. I would not have put this equipment in here to solve the problems you were trying to solve. I would have gone about it a different way. He goes, well, we're okay with that. We can put in what you want. How do you make it right? I go, well, we make it right by tearing it all out. He goes, and the cameras too? I said, yeah, the cameras have to go because they're paired up with this stuff. It's all super high-end. It doesn't make any sense. You've probably got $50,000, $60,000 worth of equipment here. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just I don't know how to configure it, and I guess the guy who installed it doesn't want to maintain it, and you guys want me to do it, but I have no idea how this is done. And I'm not quite sure I want to go through the investment of time if you're the only client I'm doing it for. Unless I want to support Ubiquity Dream Machines and Ubiquity equipment, that's a whole different career path for me. So I said, look, you know, I'm likely going to Michigan soon anyway. This may be a good time for us to simply go our separate ways. And I'm happy to help you as much as I can, but you have to understand that I have no idea what this equipment is, how it's configured, and why it was configured the way it was. I have no idea. And for me to pick it up and learn it, hey, maybe it's something easy. I don't know, but I can tell you from my initial looks, you know, looking at it and looking at the interface and looking at the settings, this is preposterous to have this level of equipment that belongs in a, you know, a high-rise building with 1,000 employees. You have 12 employees here. And so now their internet goes down about once a week, and they have to unplug the white box and plug it back in again, and it solves it. And we have no idea what's causing it. The person who installed it said, no idea. And I said, well, I don't know. I mean, just write down the date and the time. Every time you have to restart that white box, if that's all you're doing that's fixing it, we'll look for a pattern, but this will have to go on for a few months. And that's where we're at. But this customer made all these decisions, in some cases, didn't tell me they were even doing some of the things they did. And they were a company that initially just had, you know, shared networking, a network attached storage device. And then suddenly the employees got smartphones and everybody wants the Wi-Fi, so they had to have Wi-Fi. And then they got VoIP. And then they got these security cameras. And so now they are so dependent on their internet connection. And it's like, look, you know, you got to call your VoIP guy for your phone stuff, and you got to call your camera guy for your camera stuff. But now the camera stuff has replaced, instead of adding onto the network he had, they replaced his network with a whole new router, completely shut down the other router, didn't talk to me about it, never spoke to me about what they're planning to do or asked me any questions about how they can do this without disrupting the service. And in the meantime, I've got a stack of work to do this big, and then this just gets thrown on unexpectedly. So I wasn't too happy about it. And I got a feeling that I'm probably going to, use the excuse that I'm going to Michigan, because I am, to say, I just can't support you anymore. And hopefully that'll happen before anything bad happens, because I honestly have no idea how I'm going to fix it. I don't know that I can. And I don't think this customer understands just how dependent they've become on their internet connection for running 75% of their business now. Phone system, alarm system, camera system, internet, files, backups, big copy machines that function as scanners and fax machines, big $50,000 giant copy machines, all hooked up to there. Everything's connected to the internet now. Thermostat, everything. I think the last I checked, this 12-person office had 60 some odd connections coming off of the router. Or, IP addresses being pulled from the router. Crazy. So, and I haven't raised this guy's rate ever. Never. He's paying me the same monthly rate as he was paying me 15 years ago. It's the same as it's always been. They're pretty easy office. So there are times when I work harder, and there are times when I work less, and I figure at the end of the year it all balances out. But now that they've done this, I think they outgrew me. And they're going to realize that this whole equipment, whatever he invested in it, is nothing compared to what he's going to have to pay now to maintain it, because they ain't going to find somebody as cheap as me. Guarantee it. The Greek with a $10 contribution said, "You're so generous with your time. We are a tight family. You treat us well. Thank you. Team Carey." Well, look, I get as much out of it as you guys do. I enjoy hanging out with you, and I enjoy sharing my experience with you. I hope that the people that value it continue to let me know they value it. Because quite often what I hear is the negative stuff. I don't often hear the positive stuff. Usually it's like no news is good news kind of a thing. But yeah, I appreciate when you let me know that, because it certainly helps to deflect or dilute the disparaging comments that people feel entitled and deserving of, as though I was making the content specifically for them and I don't even know who they are or why they think it's important to tell me that they don't like it. Like, I don't even know who you are. So when people have nice things to say, though, that there's never enough of that, and I appreciate it very much. All right, guys. It says Peter Laycock contributed 50 pounds. Yeah, he usually, when he comes in, that's pretty normal. I just didn't get to see it, but thank you for letting me know. And if you're still watching, Peter, of course, I appreciate you very much. Sorry I didn't see it. All right, guys, I think that's going to wrap it up. I don't see any other questions coming in, but thank you guys so much. Those of you who have contributed in this stream or in past streams, or participating in the chat is another way of contributing to the channel. Letting people know who you think would benefit from content like this in a community like this to help grow the community is always appreciated. Always good to see familiar names and faces there in the chat. Good to see Remus Computer Solutions. We're going to have Acronis on the show soon. We'll have RoboForm on the show soon. And I want to bring Corey Fruitman from Instant House Call back, because the new version, 7.0 of Instant House Call, which is a great tool if you are a technician. We'll talk about what's changed. It's a major version change, and there's a lot going on in there And even I don't know what's half of it. So Corey can explain it to you and I'll learn along with you. I've been using it and really, really liking it. Instant House Call version 7. Is it 7? I think it's 7 now. And it's their first major upgrade that I've experienced since I've been using their product. And was there another one? Acronis, Roboform? Seems like I'm forgetting somebody. And who knows, maybe Remus Computer Solutions will join us for another one-on-one and talk about business, what's going on, and being self-employed in the tech world, because as you know, if you believe what people on the internet have been saying for the last 30 years, being a computer tech is dead and nobody fixes computers anymore. 30 years they've been saying this, and yet I've been fully employed the entire time with no shortage of work. So, is it just me? Or are you busy too? Remus Computer Solutions. It's pretty interesting that people will continue to read the same articles, continue to buy into the clickbait. The authors who are not in the business will continue to just make up stuff to sell a story with no accountability or liability to what they write, and people will believe it. And yet, somehow, I stay busy with work. What's reality? The person doing the job or the person who just writes about stuff? I don't know. I guess that's for you to decide. But in the meantime, I hope you've taken into consideration the benefit or pros and cons of a faster storage drive, going from, say, a Gen 3 NVMe to a Gen 4 or Gen 5 NVMe, when Gen 5 NVMe drives come out. Might look good on paper. They don't look good on the wallet for most people, and for most people won't really notice any significant difference in performance whatsoever. And if you disagree, tell me how you use your computer that would justify it. I know there are people that could benefit from it, but I'm just saying that those people are likely using their computer in a very unique way that is by no means common or average. And if you're one of those people, well, then that's a different story. But if you represent the average computer user, which is who I'm trying to appeal to have the largest audience possible, consider what you're getting for the money and adjust your expectations accordingly so that you'll be happy with your purchase. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm not telling you you should or shouldn't purchase one. I'm simply telling you what a realistic expectation would be so you don't have buyer's remorse. That's going to wrap it up for me for today. Thanks, you guys, as always, for hanging in there or tuning in, and all my friends in blue for keeping it civil in the chat room. We've opened it up for the public again today, and sometimes that brings in some bad actors, and I appreciate that my friends in blue there stomp that stuff out before it becomes a problem for me. So thanks, you guys, as always. To all my supporters, thanks, you guys, as well, for allowing me the opportunity to invest in equipment for content, whether those are motherboards, processors, coolers, storage drives. Otherwise, I'm just going to be making commercials. And I think there's enough of that here on YouTube, especially with the big tech channels. It's just a lot of commercials you guys are watching. So, and if you don't mind that, that's fine. Just, you might want to consider the purpose behind why a content creator is making a specific video. Are they making it because they were paid to make it? That a sponsor said, promote our product. Or did they make it because it was something they felt gave them purpose, that this had value to the viewer? Most of the big content creators are making what's valuable to them. It's not wrong. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just encouraging you to be aware of it. And if you prefer that, that's great too. Just see there's a difference there. And if you're not looking for it, you might not even realize some of these big YouTube channels are nothing but generating just long form infomercials for products. That's all. Not always, but who can blame them? In the meantime, I will see you all again very soon. And until then, bye for now.